Hello and welcome to another episode of Into the Afroverse with your host, William Jones. And Into the Afroverse, we're taking Black folks into the future.
It was foretold by our ancestors that in times of great conflict, there will be the chosen who will rise to restore harmony to the people and creatures of Yoruba land.
You are the child who was blessed by the first father. That is the prophecy of the chosen.
Warriors! Corrupt leopards!
The inners are terrified because the corrupt are becoming bolder, making them even more dangerous. I know what fear can do to people. That's why I'm training you to use your powers correctly. And that begins with understanding the source.
As the chosen, you have a trinity of powers: unnatural, natural, and supernatural. They build on each other. So to get to the source, you must master all three.
The chosen cannot reach the source. As long as she breathes, you will always be powerless. No!
How are we going to get to the source?
To trust each other and work together as a team. Team chosen.
Team chosen. Echo Japa! Happy now? Mango head, you scared Toye.
Actually, I'm not. You know what's really scary? You're snoring.
I do not snore.
Well.
So as you can just see, we just aired the latest trailer for Iyanu coming on Cartoon Network. Few episodes have already premiered, and we are honored to have a returning guest, actually, Dawud Anyabwile. Okay, so welcome, brother.
Oh, thank you. Good to be here.
Excellent. So before we get into the work that you're doing on the series, and also see you have some work behind you, we were talking before we started recording about the pronunciation of the television show, and you were schooling me on just the pronunciation in general, in terms of the English language versus most of the world, so the rest of the world. So, will you please share that information with us?
Yeah, well, one of the things that usually most people who speak English don't recognize, and I was the same way growing up until when I really started studying language, is basically when we start to understand just the basic vowels, A, E, I, O, U. In most other languages, it's not A, E, I, O, U, it's A, E, O, U. So when you say Iyanu, a lot of people will say Ayana. I've heard people say Ayana because they're pronouncing the U like
Right,
umbrella, but it's U, and
right,
I is Iyanu, and the creator Roy Okupe. So so his name, people may want to say that certain way,
right.
and with Dawud, uh, some people say Dawud, and I say no, it's Dawud. Really, the W is silent. And Anyabwile is really simple once you know the vowels, because it's
Right,
A is not any. I heard people say Anyabwile because that's English, but
right.
it's Anyabwile. And then once
Excellent.
you understand that, and that's not just in African nations, but even in Asian countries and things like that. Most people aren't saying A E I O U. It's A E O U in most of the other countries that I've seen, like how people say
Right.
their name.
Right. And the origin of your name, where's that coming from?
Well, it was a derivative of David because David was my birth name.
Okay.
So when I had my name changed 28 years ago, Dawud is the same as David, which is beloved and also slayer of giants. And Anyabwile is Tanzanian. That's from Nyakyusa, Tanzania, which means God has unchained me. So, when I had a transitional period,
Mhm.
um, 28 years ago, that's when I changed my eating habits and everything. That's when I really stopped eating meat and all that, and really started more of like my spiritual journey. And it wasn't really about because some people think, was it to connect with Africa because I don't really know, like looking at the family tree, I don't know exactly where, like a lot of us, we get to a certain point and then it's like uh nothing in terms of like where is our ancestral lineage.
Right.
And some people you'll say it's here, and I can't deny anybody's because it's for each one of it's our own journey. Because one thing that
Right.
gets me is when people say you're not from here, you're from here. It's like, how you know where somebody else is? You need to worry about where you from. You can't tell somebody
Right.
else where they're from,
Right.
or what they connect to. You know what I'm saying? So with me, the names that I chose were basically different names throughout the continent. So it's Daoud, Osaze, Kamau, Anyabwile,
Okay.
and those are from different countries, but I chose them for definition. And the definition was for, because basically, like when a baby is born, traditionally, you don't name the baby before the baby's born. You wait a few days to learn the baby's behavior, and maybe an elder gives the name of the baby, and then the mother whispers it into the baby's ear, and then they give the
Right.
baby the name. And that, that's in certain traditions. You find out what works for you. So for me, it was like I was looking at what my life was, and I wanted names to reflect not only the life that I was leading, but where I wanted to go. Because your name portends your destiny. Like basically, what you call yourself is ultimately what you become.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yes. Well, thank you for that. Really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, you're a returning guest, and thank you so much for coming back. The last time you were on, we were talking about your work. I believe you're doing the book on young Muhammad Ali, if I
Oh
remember
yeah, yeah,
correctly.
that
Yeah,
was a while
yeah,
back.
yeah. That was a while back. So, I was so pleased to see, this new series airing on Cartoon Network. And then I saw you're the director. I was like, wow, this is awesome. 'Cause I'm seeing this growth happen. You go from Brother Man, which is, like this classic comic, to your work and these different books that we talked about the last time, and now you're coming back as a director. So the next time you come back, I don't know where you're gonna be. So I'm
Yeah,
just,
me neither.
wishing you that forward progress, man. That is awesome. So what is it that brought you to this series? How did that happen?
Well, the original supervising director, his name's Saxon Moore, and
Hmm.
me and Saxon go back a long way. Like when I first moved to Atlanta, uh, he was an animator, and he and I worked at a studio, like an independent studio, years ago. And then we were working together at Turner and Cartoon Network on certain projects. And just like a lot of other artists, we know each other over time. Um, May worked on projects together here and there. And around the time, right when I was finishing up Victory Stand, the graphic novel about Olympic gold medalist Tommy Smith.
Yep.
Yeah, I did that book. And right when I finished that, Saxon had reached out to me about being a director at Lion Forge. So this is still before Iyanu. It was basically to be a director at Lion Forge Animation Studio. And so I was like, yeah, because at the time I wasn't planning on going back to any studios. I wanted
Right.
to like just try to build big city entertainment. And but I said, hey, it sounds like a cool idea, because I always wanted to like direct because I've worked on a lot of projects where technically I was directing, but I didn't have director credit.
Okay.
And so to have that opportunity, I said, "Oh, that's cool." I mean, it's not owed to anybody to be a director. So if the opportunity's there, it's like, yeah, this will be good, and I can
Right.
work on this skill set and get even better. So at the time, when I came in, that was 2023, I believe, and so right when I came in, Ianu got picked up a couple months later, and so that became like the main thing Lion Forge put all its muscle behind. And then I ended up being a director on one of the directors on Ianu. So I directed episodes 1, 4, and 7 in season 1. And in season 2, I direct episode 201, 204, and 207.
Excellent. So I think some people may have an idea of how someone directs a movie or, live action television show, but how does one direct a cartoon?
Okay, well, directing, yeah, because the thing about directing, um, you're pretty much overseeing many aspects of the project.
Hmm.
So prior to like say one of my early years of working at Turner and even when I worked on Rugrats and stuff like that when I was much younger, I was more compartmentalized, like, a character designer, or I do background designs, prop designs. And when I was at Turner Studios, I was doing pretty much whatever they needed me on, which is what I liked. It was different every day. One day I'm doing storyboards, next day I'm doing concept design, one day I'm doing background designs, one day I'm doing character designs, live action, cartoons mixed with live action. So it was cool because I was working on so many different things. But I'm always working under a director. So a director, they're handling all aspects of the project, and they just hand me, "Hey, can you are you available for boarding this next episode?" And yeah, I'm like, yeah. So I'm boarding the episode, but then once I hand that off, another director will come up to me, "Hey, can you design the backgrounds for this?" So the director they're handling all these other things, and they compartmentalize the certain things that need to be done to different people. So now I'm that person, and I'm handling out certain things, or I'm making sure like all these aspects need to be done for the production, like all the characters, like basically when you get the script, you have to go through the script and say, well, how many backgrounds are in this script? How many background? Okay, let's say there's a kitchen. Is we have a daytime scene and a nighttime scene. So we have to have a background created daytime and nighttime. But see, now you get a background artist and say, can you design this background based on this? Can you give us a daytime and a nighttime? But see, now at that point, I don't have to do it. Somebody else does it. You see what I mean? And now you have all these people that somebody else is doing the storyboards. But I might jump in and do some storyboards too, or I might jump in and help out with this or help out with effects and stuff like that. But eventually, that's the role. The director is basically uh, handing out the duties of things that need to be done and making sure that things are done on time, on schedule, and delivered. And then you have a supervising director that they're looking at things on a greater scale than what you may be doing. And then you have the producer of the project, and then the executive producer, the financing, and stuff like that.
Excellent. So it sounds like you wear a lot of hats when you go on this job, right? What has been the biggest challenge for you once you moved into this director's chair?
Well, I guess this would be unique because it was my first time directing uh animated series on this scale.
Okay.
Like I've worked on like a lot of commercial stuff at Cartoon Network. Um, and then when I work on independent projects, my own stuff, it's your own stuff. You can do whatever you want,
Right.
but now you're doing something that has to fit the standards of Cartoon Network and HBO Max. So um there's a lot of different hands involved. And then we're dealing with studios in Like we got a studio in Korea that's doing the animation. That's usually what happens with a lot of animation studios. Like a lot of things created here is pre-production. And the pre-production would be like storyboards, character design. Even when I worked on Rugrats and all that stuff way back then, we did a lot of pre-production at Klasky Chupo. And then the animation was actually done in Korea. And then we wait for the animation to come and then we view it at the studio. So that's nothing new right there. So there's a lot of things I'm familiar with, but when you're a director, there's things that I kind of have to like, it's like you're learning, learning. It's like there's things I already know how to do, but then you have to, because now you're working at a company and this is kind of like a new project for them, like on this, I mean, they've done animation before, but Ianu is kind of like their breakout project for Lion Forge. So you want it to look good for them. And everybody's working together to basically formulate this new process. So, it's like growing pains, a lot of things. Like say sometimes you're working on a script. Like in the beginning, some of the scripts were like kind of long, so we had to chop things down, because the timing, like, oh man, this is too long for the time slot. And then factoring in commercials and things like that. So things have to get chopped down. Then you have to revise the storyboards, so it's things like that will happen, when you get animation back from the studio, you got to tweak the animation. Characters may not look right. There's certain things that they do are like, oh man, that's on point. I like how they did that. Right. And some of the things were like, man, you got to draw over it. Like, nah, the characters got to look like this. They got to move like that, but then you also, we have a certain budget, we're not, we have a good budget, but it's not like these multi-million-dollar animations, like Spider-Verse and things like that, that has a massive team of people.
Right.
So, but this can grow, and we're dealing with the first episode of a series, because you're going to even notice in Iyanu, it evolves and the animation just starts getting better by the end of the first season, and then going in the second season, I believe that it was getting better. So it's just a natural progress, just like anything you work on. Even if you're working on a comic book, your first issue probably not going to be as when you reflect on it, it's like you can see how they got better by the third, fourth, fifth issue.
Yeah, while you were talking, I was saying to myself, it's not uncommon if you're out there watching animated series that you'll see, improvements in the quality of the animation and so forth as the series progresses. So
exactly,
so like I said, that's not uncommon. So talk to us about the show. What's the show about? I mean, I've seen it, and hopefully folks watching have seen it. But if they haven't seen it, talk to us and tell us what it's about.
Well, the show, was created, like I said, it was created by a brother named Roy Okupe. And the original, it was a comic graphic novel that him and another brother, Godwin Akban, and actually Godwin is the art director on the series. So this was kind of like a breakout for him. And he actually still lives in Lagos. And Roy, he left, well, I say Lagos, and he's in the Maryland area. So the story basically it takes place in a mythological Yoruba land.
Okay.
And it's kind of like a throwback mythology, and it follows this young girl who, she's like an orphaned child who is trying to discover her past. She's trying to figure out who she is, and there were the divine wars, and basically trying to sum it up. I tell people, and actually it is kind of sold like that. People say it's kind of like a mashup of like Avatar, Black Panther. I don't really like saying that, but people, when people say that, say, okay, that helps me understand it. But I think, and people who watched it too, they say, yeah, but this has like a lot of different layers than that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and sometimes for me it's hard to explain because I don't want to give away a
Right.
lot of what it is.
Right.
But basically she has to find the source of her powers, and that's the journey. So she links up with two other young action action heroes,
Right.
Toye and Bi, these two other young children, and they're on this journey on this basically this divine beast, the panther named Ekun, and they're basically on the way to the source to find the source of her powers, so then she can save Yoruba land from the fallen one who's trying to come back and take control of the land.
Excellent. Excellent. And like I said, I've seen the first few episodes, and I am not just saying this because you're in front of me. I sat down and watched with my family actually, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. And like you said, it can be enjoyed on various levels, various
Right,
ages.
right.
So really enjoy watching the show. The animation is crisp, all of that. So hats off to you and your team for putting that together. So you talk about it being part of the Yoruba mythology. Can you speak to, at least in your opinion, the significance or the importance of mythology to a people?
Well, I think in general, mythology is always important because that's basically like the blueprint of a culture. Like um, stories are always created that encompass the culture of a people. You know, how they eat, how they dress, what the music sounds like. Um, uh, Basically, I guess their politics or things like that within a culture. And the mythology is just the myth of the culture, like uh, things that are created to project that culture out into the world, and actually it becomes timeless. You know, like Greek mythology, everybody knows all the Greek
Right.
heroes and things of that nature. And then even ancient Egypt in Kemet has its mythology. And I've always talked about, like, here in America, like when we were creating Brother Man, actually a friend of mine had wrote an article about Brother Man and mythology, like the importance of Brother Man and mythology to basically like Black America. Because even though it wasn't, because mythology kind of is like it's like greater than, it's larger than life.
Right.
That's when we get into the supernatural, we get into the fantastic. You're taking your day-to-day lifestyle and you're making it greater, greater than actually anybody can imagine. And that's what lives on in people's minds. And
Right.
so when we were doing Brother Man, we understood that. So, hey, we're creating our own mythology about our place here in America, but it wasn't America. It was just kind of like our essence, and putting our
Right.
essence into this action adventure story that's larger than life. So what Royal Coupe did was he's taking the Yoruba mythology of ancient Nigeria and Benin and things like that, and actually even the walls of Ilu in the comic, they talk about the
Hmm.
walls. And you have people that may say, oh, that reminds me of Attack on Titan and things like that, but Roy, he actually pulled from the walls of Benin.
Yeah.
And a
Hmm.
lot of people, they may not understand that that actually is older. And that's not even a mythology. That's not a myth. That's a
Right.
reality.
Right.
So a lot of things that in other cultures that people use as fantastic, within our own mythology, we have things that are based on real life history that predates what a lot of other cultures have used. Um, but we just haven't seen it magnified
Right.
in the media, in the mass
Right.
media. So then a lot of times because myth, a lot of times it plays up on people's value too. Like, oh,
Right.
you can get caught up in other people's stories, which is great. It's great to, hey, I grew up on the Ulysses and
Yeah.
Hercules and all that
Right.
stuff.
Right.
I loved all that stuff. But at some point, you say, hey, do we have any cool stories? Like stuff, where we're in it.
Right.
Because sometimes if you don't see yourself, then you don't think that you played a part. You don't play a part.
Right.
But then you find
Right.
out like a lot of our history predated a lot of the Greek mythology.
Right. And actually, that leads me to my next question. In your opinion, you've already kind of spoken to this, but I want you to elaborate a little bit more. Um, what happens, in your opinion, when a mythology is either missing or is fed to you from someone else?
Oh, you mean your own mythology?
Yes, it's missing, or someone else gives you a mythology that you didn't create on your own. What do you think happens?
Well, that happens with us. That's been happening with us for decades. I mean, since we were
Right.
young, we were always fed our stories from someone else's perspective because usually it's the people with the finances and the power who may be the storytellers that are saying, hey, we want to tell a story about uh Africa, Black Africa. And we,
Mhm.
and sometimes it may not be out of malicious intent. It may be, okay, we want to do something that Black people can be proud of. Okay, that's
Right.
cool and all. But at some point we have to be the tellers of our stories. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
because sometimes it's not just, I've always looked at it as it's not even just a matter of uh who's telling the story. I look at it as who owns the story in the end
Right.
and who capitalizes off of the story. You see what I'm saying? And
Right.
that to me has always been valuable. And actually even more important. But when somebody else controls the story, they control the narrative. They control who the hero is. They can, um, the ethics of the story. The ethics of the hero. If they want to make the hero like, effeminate or something like that, and this hero represents. When you see that hero, it's like, how come he's not strong like Hercules? How come he's
Right.
kind of like soft around the edge or something like that?
Right.
Because the person that created it, that's what they wanted to put in there. And
Right.
you're trying to be a young man, trying to be like, yeah, I want to be, yeah, I don't know if I want this. I'd rather have Hercules. You
Right.
know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, but that's why it's important for you to tell your own story. And I was just using that as an example, but
Right.
it could be a host of anything that somebody can throw in there and you'd be like, yo, what the heck is this? You know what I'm saying? So that's why that's the importance of owning and controlling your own story. Um and be and at least if you're gonna team up with a lot, because a lot of times you want to have, there's going to be a diverse team of people,
Okay.
but if the theme is basically about a particular culture, you want to make sure that's being done properly. Because I even working on Iyanu, it was good that Godwin, uh, he was in Legos, but he was instrumental in making sure a lot of things were authentic. Down to like all the hairstyles,
Right.
and
Right.
he'll send over a lot of reference, like here's how the people of the deep should look. This is how the Riverlands people should look. And then we also making sure we wanted to put in African martial arts. That's what
Right.
Roy was big on. And that was cool because when we first started, it was, to me, it was like a dream come true because it's like that's what I always wanted to do. Because
Right.
I was playing capoeira in Gola since like '99, and I've always
Okay.
wanted to incorporate. I was always put in my artwork, and uh, I want to incorporate it in animation. And here it is, like drops in your lap. Oh yeah, the characters. Roy's like, I want them doing like capoeira and dambe. The dambe style
Yes.
where they
Yeah. I saw that.
clap with the
Yes.
hand. Yeah,
Yes. I
and
did
that's a
catch that.
yeah, northern Nigerian fighting style. And I said, this is cool, because we see all the Asian fighting styles. We grew up on that, and that's
Right.
cool. And we said, well, what would be different is we put in fighting styles from the continent. And it's like, so you're kind of borrowing from here and there, but
Right.
you're mashing it up into this mythological universe. So because I even when you see Ianu come on and Ianu, she does the flip like
Yeah.
when the Panther's coming at her. So that sequence, I actually had to. I worked out that sequence right there when it's coming on. Another brother named Philip, he's one of the main people who storyboarded that whole opening, and uh, another gentleman named Sean, and even Saxon worked on it. It was a combination of us, but I just worked primarily on that section where she was doing the flips. I actually had to think it out. Like,
Right.
okay, how she can do this, come around here like that. And that was kind of fun. And then you kind of see it in there. And then, there's going to be more of that coming up in the series. So those things are significant because
Mhm.
there may be things people may not notice at home, but it's intentional. It's not like it
Right.
just popped up in there.
Right. So, in speaking with you this time, the last time, and so forth, there's always this authenticity that you're maintaining, this cultural relevance, this accuracy. Has it been difficult? You've been successful at it, so I'm assuming it hasn't been difficult. But have there been challenges in terms of maintaining this level of integrity, accuracy, and cultural representation? Because when you start to meet with like corporate interests and so forth, has it ever been conflicting? And if so, how are you able to maintain and navigate, through this world,
Do you mean for Iyanu or just in general? One
just
like,
in general?
um, mm, I could say, I could say, yeah, but not. I haven't really had a lot of problems like that.
Good.
Most of the, I'll say this. I mean, most of the companies I worked at, um, people were always respectful to like even okay. I'll go all the way back to like when I worked on Wild Thornberries.
Okay.
And Wild Thornberries, I was like the only. I think I was the only brother in Klasky Chupo, the studio in Hollywood. If there was another black person there, I never saw him in the
Right.
building. I mean, there was a
Right.
sister that worked in the front, like receptionist. But as far as like working on the team, character designs and the storyboarding, and going walking around the building, it was primarily just me. However, I will say that I never felt like, because the characters were going all around the world, and a lot of times they
Right.
spent a lot of time in Africa. But
Right.
I always felt like, for the most part, people were doing their best to be authentic in their research. Like it
Okay.
wasn't like they were just taking stuff and throwing it in there. Like
Right.
we would research stuff. I would see how other people research stuff, and then they'll say, "No, no, you got to make it like this." The Kung tribe in the Kalahari, they do this, and when they speak with the clicks, it's this. You know what I mean? It's like
Right.
people research it. It's not like they were just because I think that was probably more old school where people were blatantly making
Hmm.
fun of black people and stuff. But I think a lot of people are more aware now, and I'm not saying you may have people out here who may be doing things that are like I think some people they may be doing things out of ignorance,
Right.
but even when I said Turner, people were always like respectful. I never really felt out of place at any place I worked at. Everybody was cool that I worked with, and I worked with all kinds of people. People respected me, and it wasn't
Right.
like I was going in there trying to act like I wasn't me. I go in, if I was wearing a Benin African mask shirt and
Right.
I had my locks and all that stuff. Because some people say, you gotta cut your locks if you live in Hollywood or work in Hollywood. They won't hire you. That's about well, if they don't hire me because I have locks, then I don't need to work there because I'm not cutting my
Right.
locks. My whole
Right.
family was locked up back then.
Right.
And they nobody tripped over. I said it wasn't my journey. So when people talk about it, they're projecting their journey. Maybe those things
Right.
happened to them. And
Right.
I think that was a different time. Like you don't really see people feeling like they got to cut their braids and locks and all that stuff to work in corporate America now. Like I don't think people really on that like that. You know, uh,
Yeah.
and people who are living in the past like that is kind of like Yeah, you gotta catch up, man. Ain't nobody really, nobody's really
Right, right,
tripping on that. I think a
right.
lot of people are really more respectful collectively. Even if we were working on something, that was Asian or whatever. I
Mhm.
don't, let's say I don't know a lot about it, but I would do research. And if
Yes.
there's somebody on there who really knows, we would push that prop that person up to say, hey, show us. Because they always say, hey, oh, we're leaning on you on the capoeira. Like, you know more about the African martial arts than us. And me, I don't know everything about it,
Right.
but I know a lot of people that play capoeira and stuff like that. So I would just bring whatever information I have to it. And then we even they brought in a brother who actually created a library of movements and things like
Oh,
that for
wow.
us to use. So that was really helpful when he came in and did that. Because prior to
Excellent.
that, I was trying to teach show, I was showing other directors in the beginning, like we would go in the rec area and play the capoeira music, and I was showing them the movements and stuff like that. But I mean, it was all in fun. But now
Right.
it was kind of cool because they actually got the budget to bring somebody in to like create a library for us to
Excellent.
use.
Excellent. And so in working on this series, what did you learn through this process? So I know, like you said, this is your first time really in a director's chair on this type of project. What did you learn in terms of your growth as a director? And what did you learn just from the experience of working on this show? Because like you mentioned, research and things of that nature going into this program. Uh, what have you learned as a result?
Um, well, to me, there's so many things I could say I
Mhm.
learned because um, if I was to move forward and work on another project, and
Mhm.
studios are different, because you're always dealing with different personalities. You could be
Okay.
doing the same thing, but it could be t- totally different experience because you're dealing with different people, different budget, different type of project,
Mhm.
you know. So what I learned here, I can go somewhere else, and then it could be totally different. You
Okay.
know what I mean? Like you have the foundation of what you're you're going to do, but there may be a lot of other elements that are different. But for me, I say, um, like I said, the supervising director Saxton, he worked with us because when we came in, we were assistant directors at first, and
Right.
then after the first couple episodes, then we basically became the directors. And because there was another brother that came on too, Darnell Johnson. He directed episode 2 and episode 5 and episode 8, and then subsequently in the second season. And he's a young brother, so he and I, we actually sat right next to each other working on our episodes. Um, and then on the second season, there was another supervising director, Vincent Edwards, and he was really good in helping us because he worked on a lot of major things out on the West Coast,
Mhm.
and so there was a lot of things he was sharing with us that was helpful as well. And me, the way I am, I never act like I know everything because yeah,
Right.
I don't. Like if somebody has something they want to teach me, I just act like I don't know anything.
Right.
I go into now I'll say act like I don't know anything. I mean, I go into a student mode
Right.
and I just want to listen to them. And even if they talk about something like, oh yeah, I know that. I don't say, oh man, I knew that. I'd be like,
Right.
okay. But then they may talk about something I know, but then when they show me a more uh uh smoother way of doing something. And it's like, oh man, I was doing it the hard way. They would
Right.
show me
Right.
another way to organize these files, another way to do the storyboards, another way, maybe stay away from these angles,
Right.
let's move into doing angles like this. And then some board artists come on board, you know, and they're storyboarding and they're boarding in a way where it's like, oh man, I wouldn't have thought to do that, you know.
Gotcha.
And then after a while, it's mind blowing at first, and then when you work around it for a while, you start understanding it, and then your mind's not blown anymore because you just learned. You
Gotcha.
see what I'm saying? And
Right.
that's what I like because it's like, oh man, I just feel like I up my storyboard skills just watching the other board artists that we brought on board. Because, you know, as a director, you look up board artists. You see people say, oh man, this person's doing it. He fireboard. We got to get this person on board. And then when they come on board and they get their scenes, and then they bring you the scenes, it's like, dang, that don't look tight. I
Right.
wouldn't have thought to do that, but now I will. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because you're learning from them, and that's always been art anyway. You know, symbiotic relationships. When you
Right.
work closely with people, you start to learn from them and pick up from them, and vice versa.
Got you. Got you. So one of the things I noticed is you keep referencing season two. So that means we got a season two coming.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah, oh yeah.
congratulations on that. Excellent. What has been the response so far?
Well, I've seen a lot of articles that were written,
Hmm.
and the articles were very positive that I've seen. I like watching YouTube videos, you know, like authentic
Right.
people. Like if they don't like it, they'll say they don't like it. If they
Right.
like
Right.
it, they'll
Right.
say they like it. And, you know, I'm
Right.
watching stuff to see, okay, let me see people, let me see if they chopping it up.
Right.
And
Right.
and you know, and most people they're legit saying that they like it. I mean, they a lot of people equate it to Avatar,
Hmm.
but they still say, even with that, they say, but it's still different.
Right.
Like they can respect that. But to me, it's just like, well, in storytelling, there's a lot of stories that are similar. You know, if
Exactly.
you take Star Wars, or, you know, people are always telling the same type of story over and over. It's just in a new realm. It's a new characters, new style, you
Right.
know, so that's really nothing new. And I think a lot of people doing these reviews, they're looking at it from that perspective, like, yeah, it reminds me of that, but this is so rich in so many other things
Right.
that, you know, you kind of, after you see that, you don't think about that anymore. Now you're in their world, you're in Yoruba
Right.
land. You know what I
Right.
mean? So I thought that was cool because a lot of people were on that. And some of the things that people may say, I actually like I was watching one review, and one brother, he was actually cracking me up because he was saying like, yeah, you know, I mean, he said he almost didn't stick with it in the beginning, but he said, no, but you know, I stuck with it. You know, there's certain things
Right.
about it I liked about it. He said, but he he felt like there was a lot happening in the beginning. You know, it was a lot, but then it kind of cooled out, and I can get with it. And
Right.
I didn't disagree, because remember I said when we first started, we had to consolidate a lot
Right.
because we were just getting started.
Right.
So people may feel that like, oh, that was a lot. But then we had to learn. We in the process had to uh, massage the stories to fit into the timeline of the show. So it's
Right.
things that you learn, and they start getting better and better and better. So the people, but one thing they all said was that I'm gonna stay with the show and watch it
Right.
evolve. So to me, I said, hey, that's a
That's
win.
that's it. Exactly. That's what you want to hear. So for folks listening and watching, it airs 9:30 a.m. East Coast time on Cartoon Network. And
Hmm.
of course it streams on HBO Max
Yeah, streams on HBO Max the following day,
the following
on
day.
that Sunday. So this weekend, we're up to episode 5. No,
Mhm.
we did what, the 5? No, episode 6 drops this
Okay.
weekend. So on
Okay.
Saturday night, it's the Saturday 9:30, the episode 6. I don't know when this airs, so it
Right.
probably aired by then. And then on Sunday, it'll stream on Max.
All right. Any plans to, I know like we're moving away from hard copies and so forth, but any plans to bring it to Blu-ray or anything like that?
Oh, that I don't know. I
Okay.
don't know, because I see I'm not at Lion Forge anymore. Like after Ianu was completed, then yeah, I moved on from there, because now
Gotcha.
they're basically just doing their marketing and promotions for that, and that's pretty much ended. So I'm back
Gotcha.
on the big city full time. So everything that's going on now with Lion Forge, you know, I don't speak on behalf of Lion Forge. I just speak on my experience on the
Gotcha.
project. So
Gotcha.
I don't know what their plans to to that would be.
Excellent. Now, speaking of Big City Entertainment, I see you have two images behind you. Can you speak to those pictures, please?
Oh yeah, like right now, I've always done like oil paintings and paintings, acrylics, and all that stuff. I was a fine artist like all through high school,
Mhm.
and then I got into comics because I wanted to do comics. I wasn't really like a comic aficionado. So when I
Okay.
did Brother Man, it was just, hey, I want to make a comic book. And then a lot of people they knew me from Brother Man. And then when I paint, they said, hey, I didn't know you could do that. And I said, no, I've been painting. I just
Right.
didn't have a chance to do it, especially because Brother Man, I went from Brother Man to Rugrats, Wild Thornberries, and like a lot of other storyboarding jobs in the interim, then to graphic novels and things like that. And at this point in my life, I said, man, I want to get back to doing my fine art because there's a lot of things I've always wanted to do. And then I'm just looking at other people doing fine art. It's like, man, I could do that. I just
Right.
don't. You have to focus to do it, and my focus has always been on the graphic novels and the comics and things like that because you have to switch your brain to think that way. So
Gotcha.
now it's like I'm having fun because I can get onto these paintings, and these right here, these are digital pieces
Okay.
that I did in Procreate, but I also have paintings here that I'm working on, like oil paintings and things like that. Then I'm planning on doing like limited prints and things like that. Right
Mhm.
now, I'm doing like open edition prints where basically I'm making prints. They're available as canvas wrap prints. I have different sizes and people can just buy them right now at my website. That's anyabwile.com. And but eventually my objective is to like have these oil paints. You can get some originals,
Right.
start doing shows, and just really starting getting known as a fine artist. Because I feel like
Gotcha.
okay, I got an animation series under the belt. Did graphic novels, did comics. Now what I want to do is I want to do fine art. I want to be known for doing fine art. And it may not always just be realism. I might take some of the mythology, the types of things we're talking about, just do some mythological stuff, but just like fully rendered paint. I had concepts in my mind, I just didn't do them yet.
Got you. Got you.
You
And
know,
one more time, can you give us the website and any
yeah,
other ways that folks can contact you?
yeah. It's my last name.com. Anyabwile, ANYABWILE.com.
Excellent. And are you on any other social medias where folks can follow you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, uh, Dawud underscore Anyabwile. Uh, and Facebook. I don't really use Facebook a lot, but I just set up Facebook because I'm running my store on there, my Facebook
Right.
store. But you
Right.
can find me Dawud Anyabwile on Facebook. And then usually people just Google my name, they'll find a lot of articles and
Mhm.
uh you know so I might be on some other platforms that I forgot
Right.
about because I create them and then sometimes I don't really use them. Because I think I have a
Gotcha.
X account, but I haven't really used it. But I'm starting to pull them out now so I can sync things up
Right.
to the new stuff I'm doing now.
And what's the future looking like in terms of, so you've spoken to, your graphic artwork that we see behind you, but what do you, any other TV projects, movies perhaps, any other books coming up? What else, what's in your future right
Oh,
now?
well, there's a book another graphic novel I finished called Bad Boy. It's the life of Walter Dean Myers,
Okay.
the author of the book Monster, and he also
Hmm.
did a lot of other award-winning young reader books. That launches in September, but you can pre-order that on Amazon and I think at HarperCollins.com they have it there. And so I was working on that prior to Iyanu, and I think I wrapped that up right when Iyanu started, and now
Right.
that's about to drop, and that's colored by a young sister named Akita Kelman, who actually she worked on Iyanu as well as a board revisionist,
Hmm.
and I think she's 21 now, but I knew her since she was like 7 years old. I was mentoring her since
Wow.
she was young, and I put in a word for her. I said, "Hey, y'all need to put this young sister on," and so she got on Iyanu, and I put her on so she can get an opportunity to work on a book because I just know how it was when I was young. sometimes it's just people that believe in you to give you an
Right.
opportunity, and then from there you fly. You
Right.
know,
Right.
because I know a lot of other young brothers and sisters who I know that they're good, and I just put their word, I put a word in for them, like, hey, y'all got to get this person in, and I because I like seeing how they respond when they really get that real opportunity. I
Right.
said, man, that
Right.
remind me like when I first started airbrushing at the mall when I was 19 years old, and the guy told me I can airbrush at the mall in Philly. I was like, I thought I hit the lottery. Like, yeah, I'm about to make $1 million.
Right. Right.
You know?
So speaking of that, for anyone watching that's interested in basically doing what you do, whether it's getting involved in comics, animation, or just selling the prints, what would be some of the things you recommend in addition to things you've already shared in terms of getting going and so forth and moving forward in this industry?
Oh, like if somebody just trying to get started.
Yes.
Well, the thing I always tell people is like just start. Just do what you're doing. Like, um, there's really like no magic dust that gets sprinkled on you, like, when you become this overnight success. Everything's going to be trial and error. It's, you may think you put something out there. Let's say like I make these prints and I'll be like, oh man, once I put this out here, man, it's on. I'll be making $1 million.
Right.
And then it may be like 6 months before you sell one, or it might
Right.
be a week. You don't
Right.
know. It's just, but the thing is, you have to make it tangible and make it available. And then you have to find out what works for you. And the cool thing is now there's nothing holding you back because
Right.
we have all the platforms, we have the the promotions on Instagram, Facebook, sell your story here, um, so many tools to promote your work. But the bottom line is you have to enjoy what you're doing. I think if you get
Right.
caught up too much in like I'm trying to sell it, and selling it is important because end goal, I want to make money,
Right. Right.
but
Right.
you also want to have fun. Like when I paint these, I feel good when I do a painting, and I could sit up at night and just stare at the paintings because I'm excited.
Right.
Like, oh man, that came out cool. Like, oh, here's one right here. You know, I don't know if you can see this too well.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see it.
Yeah.
Wow.
This from when I went
Wow.
to Senegal and I painted these young brothers right here. And
That is
so
awesome. Hmm.
yeah, so it's like it's fun. Like oh, I got another one over here.
Yeah. Please. Let's see them all.
Yeah, this one was in tribute, like after George Foreman passed away. I always like George Foreman. I always like boxing
Wow.
and martial arts and things like that. So I
Hmm.
said, well, let me at least make a painting of him
Right.
and
Right.
in his prime.
Right. And
So
all of these are available on your website.
oh yeah, all these on the website now.
Excellent.
And
And I'm sure some folks want to ask, are they on shirts or is it just right now? Is it just
actually,
prints?
I am. I'm going to merchandise them too, because I just really started. I just started a couple weeks
Okay.
ago, and um, putting together like my whole fine art store and fine art push. Because this probably be like the first interview where I'm talking about fine arts.
Oh,
Prior to
thank you.
that, everything was comics, animation, but probably from here on, I'll probably be pushing more fine art.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, brother, once again, thank you for coming back. And like I said, next time you come back, I'm sure it's going to be bigger and better things. Are there any final words that you want to share with us?
Well, I'll just say thank you for having me on, and I wish you the best on your show because you've been diligent, and I know it's not easy even with what you're doing in that space, but it's important because these are like you're creating historical um jewels, for the future, so then people know they'll know our language.
Right.
You're documenting the language now. It may just be an interview now, but years from now, people go back and say, "Oh, so this is what the creators were thinking." You know what I mean? So I don't take that lightly. I don't look at it like I'm just on a show. I
Right.
understand your value too to to growing a mythology and the value of sharing the value of the people that come on. So yeah, I just want to say thank you to you
Oh
as
wow, well,
well.
thank you.
Hmm.
I appreciate that. I
Most
appreciate
definitely.
that. Thank you. So, ladies and gents, thanks again, once again, for tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe and like button down there so we can keep this thing going. So, this is your host, Will Jones. And once again, thank you for coming on today. Really appreciate it. And this is Into the Afroverse. We're taking Black folks into the future. And a special shout out to Mr. Duke Productions for producing today's episode. Take care, ladies and gentlemen.